Good evening. Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Is this? Nope. Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes. Can you all hear me now? Okay, wonderful. I think it could be a little bit higher, Evan, please. Good evening. Thank you for our patience with technical difficulties. Thank you all. I'm Amber Norris. I'm assistant manager and hosting you all tonight. Thank you so much for attending Left Bank Books presents Elissa Bassist for her new and debut book, Hysterical. For all of you here in person, thank you for being here and for wearing your mask for the duration of the event. For those of you joining us at home, we appreciate your support. You will be able to ask questions during the audience Q&A at the end of the event. Just type your questions as a comment. It has been incredible to host over 2 years worth of virtual events. We have brought in over 300 authors virtually for everyone to enjoy over the course of the pandemic. If you've not caught any of our virtual events, most of them are free and still available to access on our Facebook and YouTube. You have a wide variety of authors for your enjoyment. We are thrilled to bring back in-person programming, though. We have more in-person events planned for November, like R.J. Smith for his new book, Chuck Berry, here at the store next Tuesday, as well as virtual events like Steve Martin and Harry Bliss appearing virtually online next Wednesday. Check our events calendar on our website for the full November schedule, what we have coming in December, and then the new year. Before we launch into tonight's book and author intro, I want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional ancestral lands of the Osage Nation. The process of knowing and acknowledging the land we stand on is a way of honoring and expressing gratitude for the ancestral Osage people who are on this land before us. So, about tonight's debut book, Hysterical. Writer Elissa Bassist shares her journey to reclaim her authentic voice in a culture that doesn't listen to women in this medical mystery, cultural criticism, and rallying cry. Between 2016 and 2018, Elissa Bassist saw over 20 medical professionals for a variety of mysterious ailments. Bassist had what millions of American women had: pain that didn't make sense to doctors, a body that didn't make sense to science, a psyche that didn't make sense to mankind. But then an acupuncturist suggested some of her physical pain could be caged fury finding expression, and that treating her voice would treat the problem. It did. Growing up, Bassist's family, boyfriend, school, work, and television had the same expectation for a woman's voice: less is more. She was called dramatic and insane for speaking her mind. She was accused of overreacting and playing victim for having unexplained physical pain. She was ignored or rebuked like women throughout history for using her voice inappropriately by expressing sadness or suffering or anger or joy. I think we can relate to this a little bit. Because of this, she said yes when she meant no. She didn't tweet #MeToo, and she never spoke without fear of being too emotional. So she felt rage, but like a good woman, repressed it. In Hysterical, Bassist explains how girls and women internalize and perpetuate directives about their voice, making it hard to emote or just speak up and burn down the patriarchy. But her silence hurt more than anything she could ever say. Hysterical is a memoir of a voice lost and found. And a primer on new ways to think about a woman's voice, where it's being squashed and where it needs amplification. Bassist breaks her own silences and calls on others to do the same, to unmute their voice, listen to it above all others, and use it again without regret. Among many other excellent reviews, the esteemed Roxane Gay said about Hysterical, "Hysterical is staggeringly good. I am speechless," which as a reader is a rare thing for me. I really just have a bunch of blubbering accolades to shower on Elissa. This is one of the most intelligent, painful, ridiculous, awesome, relevant things I've ever read. I am impressed. I'm impressed by that review. Elissa Bassist is an essayist, humor writer, and editor of the Funny Women column on The Rumpus, and a founding contributor to The Rumpus. She's written cultural, feminist, and personal criticism since the website launched in 2009. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Marie Claire, Creative Nonfiction, NewYorker.com, Long Reads, and more, including the anthology Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture, edited by Roxane Gay. Currently, she teaches writing at The New School, Catapult, 92nd Street Y, and Lighthouse Writers Workshop. She lives in Brooklyn and is probably her therapist's favorite.
Right there.
Would you all please help me in warmly welcoming Elissa Bassist for Left Bank Books. And Heather McPherson, our conversation partner tonight, visiting us from WashU, right? From WashU. So thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
That was
the best dramatic reading of my book summary. Thank you for that. I'm glad that was live streamed so I can have it. Shall I read and then shall we talk?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, my first joke is ruined because that dramatic reading was so good, but I'm going to say it anyway because I wrote it. For those who don't know what my book is about, and how dare you, it's about how a woman's voice develops or doesn't in a world where men talk and women shut up. This expectation of a woman's silence made me very sick. But spoiler alert, I'm fine now. Tonight I'm going to be reading from chapter 3 that my ex-boyfriend titled Crazy Psycho Bitches. Not to be dramatic, but after all of my breakups, I've been prescribed antidepressants. Anyone else? Every time some guy left and took with him all meaning, a doctor said there's a pill for that. Antidepressants are the new lobotomy for women dealing with trauma, writes Caroline Serrato Perez in her cookbook, Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. It's new and age-old. America has a history of prescribing pills to traumatized, anxious, depressed, too emotional, and loudmouth women. Woot! When my first therapist asked in my inaugural therapy session at age 20, at WashU, so, what brings you here today? I didn't know where to start. Didn't know just how many reasons there were, or that there were so many reasons. I thought about which reason to say first. A system of society and government in which men hold the power and women don't, and also the internet, I wish I'd said. But here's the truth. Days earlier, www.thefacebook.com, as it was known, informed me via library Ethernet at Olin that the love of my life was in a relationship with someone who wasn't me. And so, I signed out of myself and did what really forlorn actors do in movies. I found a nearby wall and I slowly slid down it, with my head in my hand and my face arranged in despair as I projectile sobbed over the Shakespearean betrayal. Here was my torch, but pictured there was his new girlfriend. I'd hung on his line, so to speak, until it was Facebook that said we were never, ever getting back together. Classmates watched me or didn't see me, texting about Michelangelo as I hugged my knees to my abdomen and rocked back and forth on the floor until the library announced it was closing. Life was, by sleight of heartbreak, dog shit. I managed to function, sort of, like I could walk if I felt like it, but I didn't feel like it. This is just being a person, I had romanticized. A woman, a hungry woman. But no one called me a hungry woman. She's a crazy psycho bitch, I'd overheard one classmate say. Maybe it was you. Back at the dorms, I saw posters for a place called Mental Health Services, and I could have kissed each one. I needed help. But for what? For this? For crying a lot? Over a boy? For acting my age and genus, 20 and human? For wanting and for needing? Because I felt crazy for feeling how I felt? But the reason I told the therapist was love. I'm in love, I said by screaming it. Unreciprocated, I added, and didn't stop for the full session. Oh, to talk. And the other person, an employee, had to listen and had to help and had to fix everything. Is there anything else you want to talk about? She asked me months later. You talk about boys an absurd amount. It was true that I consistently failed my own Bechdel test. But I was raised to talk and to think about boys above all, to have boys be my response to how are you? More than is normal? I asked her. I was thinking of the medical history form I'd filled out to see her that had me circle my title. Miss or Mrs. or Ms. Is not married or is married or was married. My relationship status was my identity. What is normal anyway, she asked. And then she diagnosed me with major depressive disorder. If I had lived in other centuries, the Greeks would diagnose me with having a uterus, which was the origin of all disease, according to them. Direct quote from the Greeks. And they would say that it caused me to behave erratically, that is, to have emotional outbursts. The Egyptians, who were the first to use the term hysteria, would use the term on me to explain my behavioral disruptions, that is, my emotional outbursts. Medievalists would label me diseased, since I didn't conform to traditional quiet femininity, that is, I had emotional outbursts. Renaissance men would call me a witch, and they would be right. During the 19th century, I'd be certifiable and incarcerated. In the late 19th century, Freud would deal with me like the university therapist by treating me using my own voice. But he'd also hypnotize me into an emotional outburst and get me to admit to some repressed weird sex stuff. A few years ago, Republicans would call me hysterical for fretting about reproductive rights. A few years ago, last night, whatever. You're being hysterical, people have told women for years, decades, centuries, for fearing for our rights and for our safety and for fearing correctly. Applause. Thank you. Yay. Today, my ex-boyfriends diagnosed me as a crazy psycho bitch, meaning a woman scorned or unloved, who is obsessed and overzealous and needy and stubborn and appears in American thrillers and horror movies and in every single heterosexual relationship. She's beautiful but psycho, sweet but psycho, driven by trauma but psycho. By the way, men cannot be crazy psycho bitches. The horror thriller dramedy American Psycho is about a legit psychotic man, Patrick Bateman. But real life men revere him because as a psycho, he can be as violent and disgusting to women as some real life men wish they could be. But not all men. I couldn't help but wonder in college, did I have a chemical imbalance and were my emotions diseased? Or was I just a thinking, feeling, speaking woman? Could it be both? It could. A woman can have the symptoms. Historically, expression has been called illness to women. Expressive women were mad women whether or not they were mad, and they were drugged all the same. Today, the label crazy psycho bitch collapses the distinction between vocal, emotional, dependent, irrational, neurotic, imbalanced, insane, hysterical, melodramatic, hormonal, oversensitive, unwell, unstable, fragile, irritating, infuriating, manipulative, vindictive, mendacious, and clinical. Until vocal itself is a symptom. Until every single ex-girlfriend is a crazy psycho bitch. I broke up with her because she's crazy has justified millions of breakups, including all of mine. Anyone else get that? How can it be that so many people's ex-girlfriends are crazy? The Rumpus advice columnist Sugar asked in response to a man's anonymous letter about dating a self-absorbed crazy girl. There's no national statistic yet on crazy ex-girlfriends. But it seems that so many of us are crazy because it doesn't take much to be too much. For example, I've been called crazy for wanting to communicate, for articulating my emotions through crying or yelling a few times in public, for texting multiple times in a row without a response, and for actually texting a little bit more than that. Too many times I put myself out there and said what I meant and have heard that's psychotic. Literally any conversation can become a diagnosis. And I know I must sound nuts because the label works. Being called a crazy psycho bitch or any variant kept me quiet while keeping me crazy. It also kept me in pain, which kept me powerless. Among the first conversations I stopped having were those in which I could be considered crazy or psycho or a bitch. And that was a lot of conversations. It was just easier to suppress my moods and my sorrows and my entire personality. Easier to yell less and ask for less and settle for less and be less. To censor my wanting and to want less. And I also tried to suffer less, either invisibly or with a smile, so as to not provoke or inconvenience or frustrate anyone at all, ever. Thank you, and now I will shut up.
We don't want you to shut up.
Okay.
So, my first question for you, Elissa. When you were 26, you just referenced the Dear Sugar column. You wrote the Dear Sugar column, which was written by Cheryl Strayed, and you wrote a letter that said, I quote, "The truth, I am sick with panic that I cannot, will not, override my limitations, insecurities, jealousies, and ineptitude to write well with intelligence and heart and lengthiness. And I fear that even if I do manage to write, that the stories I write about my vagina, etc., will be disregarded and mocked." You did override everything to write with intelligence and heart and lengthiness. Hooray! But we can see how so much of what this book is about is present in that letter that you wrote when you were 26. It seems like the fears that were preventing you from writing the book, the reason that you wrote the columnist, became the subject for this book some years later. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that journey from that letter, from feeling paralyzed when you were 26 to this here today.
I do not want to talk about when I was 26. I do not remember that letter at all. Like, I have actively not reread it since I wrote it because I remember seeing it published and I was like, nope, I don't like this. And I remember at the time, the internet was not a big deal. Like, the Rumpus had just started and I was thinking no one will read it. And then it became like an anthem of sorts, right? Like a motherfucker became an anthem, a t-shirt, coffee mug. And then I just had to sort of repress what I had written. But I remember feeling like I had all these stories that I wanted to tell that I wasn't supposed to tell and that I would be made fun of for telling and that weren't smart enough because they weren't fiction. And fiction was what we all aspired to because that's what David Foster Wallace did and we all wanted to be like him. So I was unwilling to tell those stories because I thought they made me a bad writer and a bad person and a target, and I was right. But I couldn't, she gives incredible advice throughout that letter, and I think Write Like a Motherfucker is just like at the bottom of the advice totem pole for me. Like, I really loved that she said that she would rather write a shitty book than no books. Yeah. And I finally got to that point, like 5 years, I think, after trying to write a genius book and failing, that I was like, I would just rather write like an idiot than write like a motherfucker. And once I did that, it was so liberating, where I was like, I can finally just write like myself, which is I write about my vagina ad nauseum, but I joke about it, so thank you. And the book was just a culmination of everything I had been thinking, feeling, and experiencing that I had also been disregarding and minimizing and minimizing. It sucks to be in front of an intelligent academic audience. So these were the stories that wouldn't leave me alone, and I had to tell them and like exorcise them from my psyche, and I did it, and I did a great job. Getting it out, at least. And there was so much that I had decided I was not going to write about that wasn't in the book proposal. like my time working for my bosses, none of that was in the book proposal, and I was not intending to write about it. I'd written about it years ago, not published it, and felt at peace with that, but I couldn't avoid it as part of my story. And I never wanted them to be a part of my story, but they made themselves a part of my story. That's their fault. So, I got it all out.
Well, continuing on that, that letter, which, as you said, became a sort of anthem for many writers. Cheryl Strayed said that she had a similar experience. So you described being 26 and feeling paralyzed, that you couldn't do this thing that you so desperately wanted to do. And she said that she had a similar experience, but now that she was older and wiser, she looked back and she understood that she needed that everything that had happened, she needed to go through to be able to write the book that she wrote. And I wonder both if you remember how that struck you at the time, because often the advice, like, you need to suffer in the way that you're suffering now will do you well later, is probably not advice we love to hear. But maybe you did. And how that strikes you now.
I did not like it at the time. I just was like, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to work hard. I want it all to come easily to me. And if it doesn't, then I'm mad and it's your fault, Cheryl Strayed. And I was paralyzed not only by insecurity, but by arrogance. I just assumed that I should be able to do it because I wanted to. And I spent so much time complaining about writing the book. Like I say, the book took me 11 years only, but I was really complaining for 9 of those years, complaining about writing the book, feeling guilty for not writing the book, suffering and having panic attacks over the writing of the book, and aging, which I did need to do. But at 26, you don't think you need to age. You don't think you need, like, the delusion of a 26-year-old. I'm so sorry for those pre-26. It's going to be a rough road, and you're going to really be deluding yourself. And in my 30s, I read that Virginia Woolf said that no one should write a novel under 40. And that makes now all the sense in the world to me. Because first of all, it takes 10 years to be good at writing. You have to read so much, you have to write so much, you have to write so much garbage, you have to emulate other writers to then learn how to find your own voice and to quit emulating other writers. That takes 5 years. And you have to come to terms with how much rejection you're gonna face from others, from yourself, and then also from yourself. And you have to develop a discipline. You have to get perspective. You have to try 17 other careers and fail at those before you're like, writing is it. It is the one for me. I know that because I failed in literally everything else. And I didn't know all of that. And I don't think anybody can tell you that. You just have to live that. So I'm telling you all this now, and I wish you would listen to me, but you won't, and you're just gonna make all the mistakes I made. And then you'll figure it out the day you turn 38. Cheryl was right about everything.
Yes. What is your advice to aspiring writers beyond continue to live and make mistakes?
All you have to do to write is age. That's it. Well, I said it earlier that I think you should write like an idiot. I think you should lower your expectations of yourself and of your craft in order to get over yourself, out of your own way, and actually do work and get words on the page. When I was when I first met my OCD therapist, my third therapist of my 3 in rotation, she and I worked together on rewiring my fear system. And a lot of fear was involved in my writing practice. And a lot of my anxiety was actually fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of looking like an idiot, fear of retribution, fear of rejection. And I couldn't write with all of that in my head. and I could only panic and watch a lot of horror movies like The Human Centipede, The Human Centipede 2, the full next sequence, and The Human Centipede 3 final sequence. There are 3 films. It's unbelievable. And I love that. I loved knowing that because I was like, if this one man, he's a man of course, made 3 films called The Human Centipede, for sure I can write a garbage book. I felt so inspired by his ambition. Wow. And he has made money. I don't get it. Okay, so anyway, what was the question? My advice. Okay, so in OCD therapy, I'm rewiring my fear system, and what we do to rewire the fear system is to face your fears and to do the exact things you don't want to do, which for me was sitting in a chair and writing about myself and my vagina. So we would like do what is called leaning in, which is not the Sheryl Sandberg business manifesto for sitting at a table with businessmen. It is when you agree to your fear, you agree to sit in uncertainty and discomfort, and you do the thing. So I would also agree to my fears. So I would say, maybe I will look like an idiot. Maybe people will make fun of me. Maybe I will get sued by the famous authors I'm writing about. And once I agreed to the fear, I did what I needed to do, as opposed to letting the fear take over and letting it stop me from saying what I had to say. And then I was just like moving, like I was playing jazz piano when I was writing. Because I was able to talk back to that inner voice that was like, stupid, idiot, vagina. Yeah. Write like an idiot.
That's perfect. One thing that is inspiring about your book is that it really walks the walk. So you say that you learned to self-silence and you were terrified of saying the wrong thing, but your writing in this book is really assertive, and you make claims and you just say the thing that you want to say, and you don't hide, and you don't hedge or say things halfway. And I am modeling you, so I just want to say that. I don't really have a question.
That was just a compliment.
That
I'll
was
take
just
it.
a compliment.
Thank you. I mean, that was all truly OCD therapy. Before OCD therapy, I would have worked on this book for 100 more years, and I would have tinkered endlessly. And it was learning about this therapy called exposure and response prevention therapy. And this was like an exposure practice. And I just did exactly what I didn't want to do and that I was afraid I couldn't do. And then I did it. So if you're afraid of germs, there's hope for you. You just lick a toilet seat. Seriously, it will make you do that. I'm not even kidding around. My therapist told me all about it. I love that I'm not afraid of germs.
Okay, so I want to ask you a little bit about genre, which sometimes writers hate to talk about genre or say they're not interested in genre, but I am.
What is genre? I seriously don't know, and I use it all the time. I talk about genre parody, but I don't think I know what that is.
Well, just like this book says on her little tongue, it says
category.
Memoir. Yeah, category. Category. So
memoir,
yes,
fiction,
memoir,
essays. Yes.
And I want to preface this by saying that very often people will say things about memoir like, well, this isn't like a regular memoir. This is not like a typical memoir. This is better than a regular. But those are usually people who do not read or know anything about memoir. So I just want to say that public service announcement. But I wonder if you could talk about how this book to me did feel like almost like you could have categorized it as connected essays. clearly it's about your life, but it's also much more than that. It's like a polemic. And so,
What's a polemic?
one of those. And so I'm wondering about, as you wrote, were you thinking about category at all? Were you thinking like, I want to write a memoir when you were 26, when you had this idea of that, you wanted to write? Or did you just write the book that you wanted to write and Hachette put a memoir on her tongue?
No. The worst part about having to write a book is having to sell it and publish it. So when I started writing it, well, first I didn't know what I wanted to write. I started writing a novel, which I call a fake book. And I was terrible at it because I have no imagination whatsoever. And the only thing I know how to write about is my feelings for my ex-boyfriend named Bob Taco. And so I started there. And I wrote a proposal for my agent who said, personal essays don't sell. This was in 2010. So she made me rewrite it as a memoir. So I did. And then she was like, actually, you're too young to write a memoir. You should write narrative nonfiction. And I said, what's that? And it's like Malcolm Gladwell, but a lady. So I did that. And then personal essays became hot, 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 thanks to Leslie Jameson, Roxane Gay, etc. Et al., I should say. So that's what happened. It just was, they were just all telling me what would sell, so I was trying to package what I had to say in a sellable format. Don't do that. And I don't even, and then I think they just put memoir on it. I was like, I'm just gonna write something that has what is known as a narrative arc, because I was told I have to have that. And that started in one place and ends in another, known as a journey. And I did the best I could, and it was really hard, and structure is very difficult to master. And I came up with this book, and it's very funny because there's a debate raging on Goodreads, and you should never read your Goodreads reviews. I read them all, every word. And the biggest debate raging is like, this isn't a memoir, this is a collection of essays, this is a memoir and essays, this is whatever they're saying that it is, and they're just enraged. They're like, the fact that this says memoir, 0 stars. They're so mad about it. And they're like, really, this is a funny book. Memoirs aren't funny. Like, so everyone's a critic. I hope that you will all get onto Goodreads and just give me 5 stars. I don't care if you, thank you. If you've read the book, if you like the book, just know that I wrote a book and I deserve 5 stars. Everyone who writes a book, we should start at 5 stars, and then you give an additional star for other things you like, but you never take away stars. I would love to be the Elon Musk of Goodreads. Just totally reorder it. So it's been so weird for me that people are so hooked on the genre of it, and I was like, it's a book, you guys. I did it. It's 300 and whatever, 200 pages.
I had no idea I was tapping into. Okay, your book is also full of research and quotes pulled from essayists and medical journals and all over the place. So I'm wondering if you could talk about your research process. How and where did you pull from? How did that process work?
I would love to say that I'm very into research and I think it's important, but I just had to do it because nobody believes women. And nobody listens to women, and nobody takes my experience as fact, proof, or evidence of anything. So I knew that. So as I was writing, and part of the conversation of, is this a memoir? Is this narrative nonfiction? We want it to be narrative nonfiction. When we were on the narrative nonfiction kick, this was like, you need to have research, statistics, analysis, And I just was like, I don't know how to do that. My friend, I remember Tammy Schulman, met her at WashU in the computer lab because we didn't own computers 75 years ago. And she was like, you cannot, like, you write about like your feelings for fuck taco, like there are no statistics to support that. I cannot imagine you including statistics. So it was something that was very difficult that I was forced to do for a variety of reasons. And then when I got into it, I got really into it because I was finding so much that illuminated, clarified, contextualized my experience. And then I like couldn't stop. And I remember my editor was like, too much research. You need to cut back on all the research. And I was like, no. I was like, I'll meet you halfway and put it in footnotes. So that's how that happened. And I left out so much because, again, I was writing the book for 11 years. So a lot happened in those 11 years. And we weren't expecting that 2016 election to go the way that it did. So there just ended up being the most amount of information to go through. But the themes I was seeing were like blowing me away, that I could find an anecdote or a study done in the 1940s that backed up what women are experiencing today in healthcare. And it could go like even farther back than that, like centuries. So then I just I couldn't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Exciting things.
Okay, is it time for questions? Yes. Yes.
Wait, there's one good question in there that I need you to ask.
Is it the last one?
It's the movie one.
Yes.
I asked her to ask a few questions, and this is one of them.
I wrote all of these questions. I was wondering.
Yes?
Who would play you in the movie version of Hysterical?
Thank you so much for asking that unexpected question. I've given this no thought and would have to say Timothée Chalamet. I think he would be excellent as playing me. I just learned that that's how you actually pronounce his name, and I can't stop saying it. Someone asked me this question in earnest, and I didn't know it was happening, and I said Timothée Chalamet because I do think he would be epic. And then the audience was like, "It's Timothée," and I was like, "No, it isn't. It is. It's Timothée Chalamet." Can anyone confirm? Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone have questions for Elissa?
I have a question. Hi, I'm Gina. Thank you so much for your reading, for being here. Okay, so this is, I guess, a little too personal.
I'm so excited.
Okay, I started writing when I was 27, and now I'm 35, and I'm arrogant. And so I was wondering if you have any tips for getting out of the slush pile.
Ooh, getting out of the slush pile. Yeah. Okay. How long have you been writing?
Since I was 27 and
Okay.
I'm 35, and that makes it 8 years.
All right. So 2 more years from now, that's when you'll get out on the day. Yeah. So okay. So the slush pile, for those who don't know, and you're so lucky that you don't, it's like the general submission pile. It's where you submit your writing when you don't know an editor or have dated anybody at this publication. I love the slush pile. Like, as an editor, I love reading the slush pile and finding new emerging voices. So you might want to target publications that publish new writers.
Yeah.
Okay, you tried that one. Okay.
Yes.
The places you submit, do you religiously read what they publish? Okay, no.
Some of them, yes. Some of them, yes.
Okay,
But no.
wherever you want to get published, you must religiously read so that you're giving them what they want. Because I'll say one of the biggest mistakes I see in submissions is that people are just submitting to submit and to get that off their list, having no idea what it is that I publish. And I would say that's like 75% of submissions. So I know people aren't reading. I know you're not reading as much as you should be reading. So that's one, is to make sure you're submitting to a place where it's very potentially a fit. And it's okay if you don't know, but you've done your research, but do your research.
Yeah.
Okay. So read all the time. Go to events like this one where you meet editors like this person, and then you can email me and say, I met you at your reading, I complimented you, then compliment me 5 more times. And say, like, here's my submission, and then I'm so happy to read it, and I might not accept it, but I could give you notes, and I can point you in the right direction, and you just always want to be like a big fan to people you want to write for, and you can send them personal notes via email, because all of us have our personal emails on our website because we are arrogant and insecure at the same time, and we want to hear from you. So like just sending like a nice note to Roxanne Gay, like, I loved this, very specific compliment. I've been writing for this amount of years, and you've inspired me, and like that's it. Maybe now she just knows you're alive. You're making a connection through being a fan. But not asking for any favors, not saying I want to pick your brain, not acting entitled to their attention or publication. Submit a lot. A lot. Sylvia Plath said, I love my rejection notes. They show me that I try. And if she can say that, right? I feel like, I remember Marshall Clemashevsky, who teaches at WashU. Marshall Clemashevsky.
I think,
He told me that the writer's first professional goal should be to amass 100 rejections.
Oh, for sure.
Great. So, and the successful writers I know are not published a lot. They just submit a lot, and they get like 100 rejections per acceptance.
Okay.
And I think you learn a lot from submitting and getting rejected, and you just have to become a better writer. So I would take maybe writing classes on the internet or in person, whatever you like.
Yeah.
You try that. Because a lot of these teachers are also editors. I mean, I obviously have the most advice in the world for you, so we can continue this offline. But there are many ways that you can also, when I wasn't getting published, I just started my own column. Because I was like, this is sexism that I'm not being published. And the world needs to hear this voice. So you take your arrogance and you start your own thing. And then people flock to you. Everyone I know who started their own thing, they did it because they were rejected. Like Roxanne Gay, she used to have a website called I Had Become Accustomed to Rejection, where she published all her rejection letters. And I remember I accepted her piece because I didn't want to be on that website. You could do that. And then she started she started her own journal. She started like her own thing. So start your own thing. Start writing on Substack. Start building your audience, write for free until they start to pay you. Don't try to like get in with the gatekeepers if it feels impossible. And it's very hard right now to be a freelancer.
Yeah.
Start a Substack. Is that what it is? Substack.
I don't know.
Newsletter.
Okay.
Yes, Substack. I'm getting a thumbs up. That's what you're gonna start.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Wonderful advice. Thank you.
You have a question. Or
I have a
comment.
question from our virtual
Oh,
audience.
Cool. Is it
Um,
from my dad?
It is from your mom.
I should have guessed. I had 2 choices.
She is watching on YouTube from Colorado
Amazing.
and called in to say that she wants you to know you're doing a great job.
Thanks, thank you so much for conveying that. I'm so proud of her that she got on YouTube. Good job, Mom. We tried to watch Love is Blind together last night and she couldn't do it. I had to do it without her. Any questions about Love is Blind? Question right here.
Not about Love is Blind.
Fine.
Yeah, this is gonna be a real letdown now. So obviously you have like a really humorous voice, both in person but specifically in the book. And I'm wondering how you balance that and like making jokes without making it seem like you're like making fun of your own experience or not taking it seriously.
Cool. So yeah, that's hard. That takes another 5 years to learn. So I think when you're trying to be funny, you first have to ask yourself, like, am I the person to make fun of this thing? Am I the person to make fun of this person? And so I think to myself, like, you can make fun of people and institutions with more power and privilege than you. So I can go after white men and white women, which includes me, and that's it. So I feel very safe making fun of all men at all times, like it's time, for them, to get some jokes thrown their way, and then I can make fun of me and my experience. And like, you also have to be really careful when you're making fun of harsh topics like I do, like rape culture, suicide and depression, illness, mental and physical. But because I've experienced it and I have perspective on it and insight and criticism, I feel that I can make fun of the institutions like rape culture, that I'm not making fun of people who have experienced sexual violence. I'm making fun of a culture that allows people to experience sexual violence at such high levels, and that also doesn't let us talk about it. And I find that those difficult topics, like, it's really hard for people to listen to those topics. It's hard for people to listen to a sob story, and they will listen to a joke over a sob story. So I feel like I can trick people into listening to me and into understanding me by making a joke about it. And I realized that by watching satirical television and reading satirical books, where I could learn about sexism. I'm thinking of like Inside Amy Schumer specifically. That's like a really awesome satire that talks about difficult subjects in a hilarious way. Like, one of my favorite jokes, she's on, they're in like a birthing class, but the twist is that the parents are afraid they're gonna raise assholes. So one parent says, what if my kid does something unforgivable, like rape? No, what did he say? Like DJ or rape. And then this next, sorry I ruined it, sorry Amy Schumer, I know you're watching. Then the next character says, like, dads, you need to talk to your kids and say, don't DJ. And it's like, you're saying what you're saying without saying it.
Right.
And I love that style of joking. And you're not making anyone the butt of your joke. You're making like the problem the butt of the joke. That's what you're criticizing. That's what you're making fun of. And I just personally, when I'm sitting at my desk writing about rape and suicide, like, it's a real bummer, shockingly. It feels terrible. And I was doing this in grad school where I was getting my MFA in creative nonfiction, and I was just totally bumming myself out. So I took improv and sketch classes just to laugh again. And I learned so many writing lessons and the difference between subject and target, and what I was making, what subject I wanted to make a joke about and what target I wanted to hit. We can talk more about this later offline. Okay. So I just needed it for myself. Like, I just remember like making all the rape jokes I made in the book, and I made them a ton and I loved them. I just thought they were so funny because they were criticizing the culture. And I was really hoping I would get a review that said most rape jokes in a book, because I really wanted someone to notice and appreciate that.
That's what I'll write on Goodreads.
Thank you, please do. I would love that. I would love that so much. And I've like written and experienced bad, inappropriate rape jokes that aren't jokes, they're threats. Mm-hmm. And we call them rape jokes and they're not. And so like thinking about it critically in my life and having bad experiences with it, I know what not to do. And I know what makes me laugh and what makes a topic easier for me to process and articulate and present to an audience. Did I answer your question?
That was perfect.
Okay, cool.
So we have one more virtual question, and I just want to let you know you're getting a plethora of greetings and accolades from various family members.
I was just going to say it had to be from family. Yeah.
Among them, I'm just gonna read the one that asks a question.
Okay.
Your loving stepmonster says, so proud of you, and have you thought of what your next book will be about? And if we can wrap up with this question then.
Fuck you, don't ask me that. I'm doing this book now. I love you, Step Monster. My next book, well, I'm working on a humor craft book where I'm going to talk about how to make dark jokes and be funny and rip someone's heart out at the same time, because I think that's an important feeling to have simultaneously. So I'm working on that, so I will be able to pay my rent. That's what she wants to know. This is how I'm going to pay my rent, what my next job is. That's what she's trying to say. She doesn't care about the craft. Probably I'll also write a sequel to this book called Hysterical 2, the Fuck Taco Chronicles, where I write I include all the stuff that was cut in the Fuck Taco chapter, because about 1,000 pages were cut about my thoughts and feelings for Fuck Taco. So I look forward to publishing that. Self-publishing that, I should say.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Elissa, for being here and for writing this book.
I'm pretty sure these aren't working.
I was just going to say, these didn't work the entire time, and I felt just like a kid with a flame microphone, and it was so fun.
We don't know what the issue is. But before I let you go, I want to rectify a wrong. I realized in the moment that I had not given Heather's bio. So
I didn't know this.
I have it now. So if I'll just really quickly acknowledge you, if that's okay.
I can't wait.
Heather McPherson teaches humor writing at WashU in St. Louis. Before returning to academia to earn her MFA in creative nonfiction, she helped edit articles and books for a variety of national magazines and publishing houses like Rolling Stone, Talk, Workman Publishing, and Miramax Books, 50% of which failed and were shuttered shortly thereafter. She has interviewed Monica Lewinsky and Donald Trump and feels sure, I'm going to check on this, that tonight will be more pleasant for everyone involved.
Can we now do a Q&A with you?
Thank you all so much. Elissa is going to be doing signing, and if you want it personalized, I'll come around with a Post-it to get the spelling of your name, and we can just sort of try to make a line this direction. She'll be signing up here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I never push my luck.
I believe you.
I really did not push my luck. Oh.
I got two.
You're the funniest. Oh my god. I'm actually so mad at you. I did. No. I like searched my I sent it and I stopped it. I have no idea. And I wanted to, I mean, I'm actually an essay. It's possible. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at myself. It's a draft. It's fine. Yeah. Hi, you're here. I am here. I came on a little solo adventure. I was trying class and everyone's like, and then I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. Oh, you've done it. Whatever. Hey, Will. Long time no see.
Oh, yeah. No way. That's so cool.
I'm in modern humor writing. It was like probably my favorite class. Really? Yeah. When'd you take it? I took it last year. Did you take it with Morgan? Morgan. I don't think so. Maybe. Yeah. No, it's, I mean,
Oh, right.
there's a reason it fills up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was only.
I never
Yeah.
followed this. All right.
It was so much fun to-
Oh.